think we're live. Yay. Okay. Welcome back to, yeah, there we go. Welcome back to another Transmission Tuesday. Um, if you are seeing this after it's been posted on YouTube, my name's Kate, if you haven't met me. And I come into my private Facebook group, the Indigo Instinct Healing Matrix, every Tuesday at 12 in Atlantic Standard Time so that we can chat about things that are going on energetically and tips and tricks for the energetic world and how to help heal yourself and how to get to a place where, as an empath, you feel like you can thrive and really exist resiliently in the outside world and the world out there. So today I wanted to we talk a lot, and especially in the spiritual community, we talk a lot about the energies of love, unconditional love and compassion and understanding and all of those sort of like warmer feelings. But I wanted to talk a little bit about some passages and some information that are in Maureen St. Germain's book called Waking Up in 5D. And if you haven't heard of this book, and you're interested in sort of spiritual awareness or awakening, I would highly, highly recommend it. It's very helpful and it's very, hi. It's very relevant and kind of no nonsense, which I really like. So, as I was saying, we talk about these emotions that are sort of like warm and loving, but I wanted to talk about the 5 common emotions that keep you stuck and keep you trapped. And I know it's January and I know the energies are all about, make yourself over and do all these things and have all this ambition and all of that. And if you have sort of embraced that mentality and you are taking the steps to try and change something in your life, or maybe you have been for a while and you haven't been able to get anywhere, it might be because you have one of these 5 emotions that tend to come up for you that really keep you trapped where you are and really keep you from moving forwards. So, according to Maureen St. Germain, these 5 emotions are the emotion of resentment, the emotion of fear, the emotions or the energies of complaints and blaming others, the emotions of self-righteousness and this sort of stuck belief of this is how it is, and the emotions of denial. And there's a passage, though, just a short passage I wanted to read to you from this book that I found really hit home for me and sort of turned a light bulb on for how I process my own emotions. And it says, "Your emotions can only react once, but your mind can rerun that emotion, causing you to suffer by replaying a scenario, reinvigorating the feelings, and causing any pain and suffering that was once felt to be felt over and over. It's like picking at a wound that is trying to heal. What would happen if you couldn't replay a difficult experience? What if your memory could only produce data and not replays of emotion?" So I found that really helpful because I really feel like that happens to me. That's my hang up, is that I replay stuff and and you refeel it. When you replay something or when someone experiences a triggering event, they feel all those emotions again. So we're going to talk about the 5 that I mentioned before: resentment, fear, complaints, self-righteousness, and denial. And I'm going to give you a little tip at the end of each of them to help yourself sort of move out of those. So our first one, I've got some notes here. Our first one is about the energy of resentment, the feelings of resentment, and the energies of complaints and blame. This is a maritime saying from the TV show The Trailer Park Boys, but we're going to get 2 birds stoned at once and talk about resentment and complaints at the same time. And both of these feelings, resentment and complaining, are rooted in the energy of blame. And where blame comes from, when you're blaming someone else for something, It's because it allows you to have validation for your experiences. And everybody, like somatically in their body and systematically, needs validation for their experiences in order for them to be able to process what happened to them fully. It's like a human thing. Everyone needs to be validated for what happened to them. But it's your responsibility to give yourself that validation and to give yourself that moment of, okay, wow, this happened to me, and yeah, it was really unfair. Or, yeah, maybe speak to one person that you care about and allow your story to generate validation from them so that you can feel like you actually experience something fully and not kind of be stuck in the loop. But in order to seek that validation and give yourself that validation, that's your responsibility. And when you are in the energy of blame, what you're doing is you're seeking that, or you're allotting that responsibility to another person. And it's now that other person's responsibility to give you validation for your experience. So we tell ourselves this story of constantly being wronged. We're wronged by someone, or this person did this to us, or they made us feel a certain way. And when you're using language like that and giving away that power of you having the ability to feel your own emotions and to control your own emotions or control your own emotional response, you get trapped in this cycle of a victim mentality mindset. And when you're in a victim mentality mindset of they did me wrong, you've taken a situation that involves two people and you've polarized it to the victim and the wrongdoer. And as we're seeing in the States, like, polarity consciousness is one of the most dangerous things we can have, because it creates a split down the middle of you're either this way or this way. So it moves you further away from resolution, and it makes it harder for you to resolve the situation within yourself. So, in short, what happens when you're in the energy of blame, or you have resentment, or your complaints or complaining, is you're passing off that sort of weight of your situation and of your energy onto another person and saying they're responsible for it, they're responsible for my validation, and it's not my problem to deal with. And that's going to make it impossible for it to resolve, because it's your job to validate yourself. So my helpful trick for resentment and complaints is, when you have something happen to you and you're feeling that sort of resentment or blame or complaining, tell your story 3 times. Give yourself a cap of 3 times max. You can tell 3 different people. You can tell one person 3 times and sort of ruminate over it, but allow it to be a story that has a limitation. And once you have gotten it out and you have successfully sort of expressed yourself, then give it an ending and give it an end time, so that once you've hit your 3-time limit, it will cut your mind off from continuously ruminating, because you've categorized it as, oh, I've hit my 3-time limit, it's done. And that will help you move into a place of being able to process it for yourself, instead of pushing that sort of blame onto another person. So our second one, I wanted to go to this one right after because it's a bit more kind of triggering, is the energy of self-righteousness. And self-righteousness kind of is like a triggering word in general, but what I mean by self-righteousness is that really firm belief of, like, I believe that what I said is 100% right. I am the only person that understands, and this is just the way it is. And sort of that rigidity in your thinking and that rigidity in your belief of how things are. So the neighbor of validation that gets wrapped up with self-righteousness and this energy of bitterness, or no, I guess the neighborhood of validation is bitterness, and is this energy of self-righteousness, because instead of needing validation, we get stuck in a state of reevaluating what happened to us and reevaluating our situation that gives us justification for our anger or our pain or our discontent. So instead of seeking that validation, we're seeking the justification for it and how wrong it was and how right you are to feel that way. And this is a really dangerous one because there's always justification. Like that, you're not ever going to be told that you're crazy or you're going too far when something intense happens or you have a disagreement, and how you're feeling has justification. The thing about this emotion and this energy is that you have to recognize, or I ask or invite you to recognize, that feeling in this way of, I know I'm right and I know this is how it is a choice. Your feelings of holding on to that situation and continuously justifying it and continuously choosing to be angry, it is a choice. I know that a lot of people don't like to hear that because it's much easier to really stew in your emotions instead of doing the much more challenging thing and stepping out a little bit and recognizing, right, I have the option to let this go. I have the choice to let this go. And the thing about justification is that it doesn't actually serve you all that well. It helps you understand what happened at the beginning and helps you understand that validation that, yes, you have a reason or you had a reason to feel that way. But after that sort of split second of your brain recognizing something, choosing to hold on to that sort of negativity and that sort of heavy emotion, no matter how justified you are, is essentially like holding onto a hot coal. And the only person it's hurting is you. It's not going to hurt the person who hurt you. It's not going to hurt the world that did you wrong. It's really just creating a cycle on top of yourself that's keeping you in this sense of stuckness. So the trick for self-righteousness and the trick for that feeling justified and feeling justified in your anger is doing the hard thing and recognizing your choice. And you always have a choice to feel a certain way. You always have a choice to let it go. And you ultimately have to decide, how do I want to govern my life and how do I want to feel? And if I want to paint a picture that's primarily negative, then I can choose the bad stuff the whole time. You will be justified and you'll have a reason for it. But it's an interesting way to live your life if you're looking at the bigger picture. So consider weighing which paintbrushes you're using right now to evaluate your life, and just play around with the idea of choice and the idea of what options you might actually have to let things go. So that's that one. And then this one I kind of like. This is denial. I kind of like this one because it plays with reality a little bit. And anything that has to do with alternate dimensions is a little fun. But our fourth kind of challenging emotion is denial. And the reason this one's kind of sticky and sort of time warpy is that when you live in a state of denial, or maybe you just have one situation and you're choosing to be in denial about that situation, what you're doing or what's happening as a result of your denial is you're essentially creating this like crazy dimensional division between what happened to you that you feel is true or you feel is accurate, and the whole story of what happened or is what is happening. And when you make that decision to live in denial, you've got this sort of splice that cuts you off from seeing the whole picture and being in the full reality. And I mean, the reason that the denial is kind of a tempting emotion to feel is because it keeps you in this sort of arena where you can understand everything that's happening. You know, you don't have to feel the really heavy emotion. You don't have to break down, and you don't have to admit that you don't really know what's happening, because you have created a much smaller box of your own reality. And in that box, you understand everything. So the thing about denial is it's a bit like an emotional paddle ball. And this is going to be a bit of a generational reference, but when we were kids, you'd have like one of those wooden paddle balls with a like stretchy elastic and a ball on it, and you would hit it back and forth. And denial does that with your emotions and the emotional situation by essentially, when you're denying it, you're hitting the ball way out, and it's pushing all those difficult emotions and all of those feelings far enough away, but it's inevitable that they're going to snap right back at you, and it's going to hit you a lot harder than you would have felt if you had just allowed everything to be there at the same time and just allowed it to be present, even if you didn't understand it all, or even if you couldn't compartmentalize it all. So this denial also kind of gives us this sense of separation because we've created this sort of rift. And the key of stepping out of separation, the trick that I have for denial, is the word integration. And if you can either find support or have support in your world, in your family, in your friends, or if you know how to hold yourself in a way that allows you to integrate, no matter how slowly, what is happening to you or what is happening in the situation, it will help break down those barriers of separation and break down those barriers of denial and allow you to see things as one, even if they're a gigantic mess. That's kind of the key, is even if everything is an absolute like gong show of tangled yarn, it's still going to be easier to process if you see it as one thing instead of trying to cut yourself off in a way that you can only understand what you have. So that's denial. And then our last one is fear, which I could easily talk about forever. And I think there are many books that are just about fear. And the reason that fear is sort of the trickiest one or the hardest one or the biggest one that sort of hits people is that it's not always easy to see, and it's kind of a shadowy thing. Like, fear is often indescribable, and on top of it being kind of indescribable, it's also very visceral. Like, it's very felt in the body, it's very present in the body, it clouds the mind, it puts you into that fight, flight, or freeze. You know, it really wreaks havoc on your actual system, which can make it hard for you to act. So the trick with fear, or one of the sort of keys to fear, is understanding that fear is actually a messenger. And if you can sort of see fear as this like clouded entity that has like a bow and arrow on its back, and it looks scary and it looks like it's going to hurt you, but what it's actually trying to shoot towards you is a message that you need to hear, then you can begin to sort of separate the visceral feeling of fear with the question of, what is this message trying to tell me, or what is this message that's being delivered to me? And fear comes up when there's something in your life that isn't in alignment. And maybe that is because you're stepping out of your your zone and your boundaries. You're pushing your boundaries and you're making a leap towards something great. And fear is coming up because it's going, wait a second, I don't recognize this. And this isn't in alignment with the current limitations you've set for yourself. So when you're pushing yourself past that, it can feel really scary. And then other times it's coming up when things aren't in alignment because it doesn't feel right. And maybe there's a message that needs to be sent that, hey, I don't actually feel this is a good idea. And that's why this sort of fear is coming up, it's this incongruency, this sort of like puzzle pieces not fitting when fear decides to rear its head and really throw itself out there. And this is all to say with a grain of salt, because when people have a lot of sort of trauma in their background, or they've had a lot of traumatic experiences, occasionally fear can arise without a particular reason and without a message, or without an accurate message. And if that's the case, then a true key is really getting to know what that fear is, and what, like, just say you have 4 things that really scare you deep down. Can you actually name them? Or do you just notice that when you go to do something, you get really scared? Or when you go to make a decision, you get really scared and then you don't? So for people who have like that sort of misalarm that when fear goes off unnecessarily, or for people who are just trying to work out getting through fear in general, being able to tell what your fears are will be extremely helpful in moving forwards, because you'll then at least be able to move towards a solution when you can identify them. So the trick for fear, other than being able to identify what they truly, truly are, is get in the habit of practicing to ask yourself for the message, or ask fear for the message of what it's trying to tell you. So the next time you have something that makes you feel really fearful, see if you can take a moment with yourself and just kind of ask, okay, I recognize the fear, what's the message? And that's it. And just ask yourself that, what's the message? Instead of letting the emotional tidal wave of fear be the thing that's in control, allow your logic to come through and allow your curiosity to come through. And that will help sort of break up the shadowiness of fear and help you see things a bit more clearly. So those are our 5 tricky emotions for today's Transmission Tuesday. Again, from Maureen St. Germain's book, Waking Up in 5D, highly recommend if you haven't read it, and if you're interested in shifting out of this sort of fear consciousness and kind of shifting into something else, or at least gaining some more tools of how to practice doing that. I love your feedback. If you have any suggestions or anything you would like to see on one of these Transmission Tuesdays, whether you're on YouTube or on my Facebook group, throw me a comment down below, and please feel free to like, share, and subscribe if you're on YouTube. And if you're in the Facebook group, thank you so much for being a part of this. I love this family, and I hope you guys are all having a radical day, and I will see you next week.